Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Monkey Wrench. I'm Kelly, the monkey with the wrench. We are going to continue today on this Craftsman ZTS 6000. In the last video, we got the motor running. I still haven't cleaned the carb, but the carb was clean enough with an IV tank to run for 5 or 10 minutes. And we took the seat off so we could test the drive system, and we drove it around the yard. So we know the drivetrain's good. Now, if you watched one of my previous videos, you would have known why this thing failed in the first place. And I'm going to see if I can show you that real quick here, real close. If you look at these teeth, this is plastic. See if I can get a little better view on it. This is a plastic gear. And what happened was the entire bottom portion of this gear has been worn off. The top's still there. Let's see if I can show you that. You see how it's worn off? And that's where the starter gear pops up and spins and makes the flywheel turn. So I priced, what I was originally going to do was replace this gear. You take these pins. There's 3 of them on this. This is a V-twin. You have to grind those out, push them out with a punch, and then you can replace that gear. And that was about 75 bucks just for that stupid gear. And then this morning, my buddy, my partner Jim, he and I had to go do a pickup. One of the girls that works at the local gas station knows I fix machines. And she had this lawnmower here, and she had a Super Bronco Rider, which is the big hydrostatic one. And it also had the V-twin in it. And the motor was the same size. This is a 26 horse, and hers I think was a 22 horse. But the body and everything was good. It needed a new motor. So we decided he's going to pull that motor off and scrap the motor, and we're going to get him another motor because we get motors cheap. And we're going to repower that thing because it's in excellent shape. The body, transmission, the deck, it's a 50-inch deck. Everything's great. But when I was looking at it and we were discussing what we were going to do with it, I realized that the motor on that was the same, within a few horsepower. We don't know exactly what the horsepower on that one was because the cowlings and stuff were missing. But being that they were both 50-inch decks, both V-twins, both Briggs, same carburetor, same everything, we took a chance. So we pulled the flywheel off of that because he was going to scrap the motor anyway. And I stuck it on there just to see if it would fit. And it did, tentatively. It fits onto the shaft the way it's supposed to. It fits down here where the starter is. Now I can't exactly tell whether there's enough room, but there should be for that starter gear to pop up. Now one thing you have to know about starters, or about flywheels, is that you get some that have plastic gears on them. Okay, just like this one. Has a plastic gear on it. And on the starter is also a plastic gear. This is the fan that went on top of that. Now this fan is not quite as tall. Maybe. As the fan that's on here. But either way, we could take this fan. This is just a plastic fan. We could take that one off of there and put it on there, so that the height is correct, so that our cowling will go on and our seat will go down. So I'm not concerned about that. But some flywheels are this is all cast iron. Now this is a little rusty, but there's nothing wrong with it. It seems to fit. This is the old flywheel. When we put the old flywheel on top of the new flywheel, it seems to fit. It seems to be the same. And I counted the teeth. On the old flywheel is 113 teeth, and on the new flywheel is 113 teeth. So pulled that flywheel and pulled this starter. This starter has a metal gear on it, okay? Whenever you have a metal flywheel, you have to have a metal gear on your starter. If you have a plastic flywheel gear, there's a plastic gear on your starter. And those are the two things that wore out. That's why Carlitos got rid of this machine, because he didn't know why it happened or how. And once I pulled it off and saw that this was plastic, I realized as soon as it misses a few teeth, it'll spin this thing, engage incorrectly, and rip every one of those teeth off. But we couldn't tell until we got it off. Now that it's off, we know the problem. So instead of spending 75 bucks to replace this ring, and it also comes with a gear, which, hang on, I think I have over here. Bear with me, I'm looking for the gear. I bought the new gear yesterday while I was at the parts house. I bought a plastic one because that was what was on that starter. And I was going to buy the new plastic ring and put it on the flywheel. But since we got a donor, what I'm going to do first is test this starter. I'm going to pull the old starter off of the zero and see if it matches. If it's the same starter, I'm going to put power to this and see if it kicks. And then if that's good, we'll put this starter on there. We'll put this flywheel on there. We'll use this shroud, put it back together, and see if it's all going to fit. So that's the plan. Give me a few minutes to get set up. Okay, now before you do this, a word of warning. Anything that you're working on machine-wise can bite you, can zap you, can do all kinds of stuff. This is a battery from a motorcycle. It is a 12-volt battery. You have to check if you use small batteries. I like this battery because I can carry it around easy. It doesn't weigh much, and I don't have my jumper cables. So, 12-volt battery, 12-volt starter. All I've done was taken some leads that have alligator clips on the end of them. I put one to the negative side here, and I just clipped it to the body of the starter, anywhere that will ground. Now, this will work, but it will not work long term. The amount of power that runs from the battery to the starter is pretty high. It has a really powerful draw, and it'll actually burn these up pretty quick. But all we're trying to do is test this starter. When I take the positive lead and put it to this terminal, all I want to see is this Bendix gear kick up and spin. Let's see if that'll work. See that? Now it looks like it needs to be greased. I'll have to put a little bit of grease on there because that gear got stuck up at the top. But we have a good starter. Let me put a little grease on there. I'm just going to spray it, and we'll test it again, see if we can loosen that up. I'm not doing anything fancy to it. All I'm doing is spraying it with a little bit of grease, a little bit of oil. It's probably got some dirt on it. No big deal. And we're just going to make sure that it's free enough. I'm going to spin it again and see if it'll come back on its own. Now, also, when the flywheel's spinning after this starts, it should kick that gear back. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But we got a starter. That's good. And we will just keep working with it and see why that wants to stay up. Feels like it's getting a little stuck. If I have to, I'll pull this clip, pull this off, and replace the spring, but I think we're going to be okay. We have a good starter that came off of that donor machine that we got today. So that's all I'm going to do there. The next step is I'm going to pull the old starter, which is right there. There's only 2 bolts in it, and I believe it will match. So instead of swapping gears, and I could pull that spring off of there if I need to. Instead of swapping gears, we know this starter was having a few issues with rust on the post. What I'm going to do is move the tank out of the way, pull the 2 bolts out of that starter, and we're going to bring it over here and match it up against this starter. Now, I'm not worried about any height differences here. That's not what concerns me. All that matters is the bracket's the same and the teeth are correct. Now, when you're dealing with a plastic flywheel and a plastic gear, which is what the old one was, for some reason the teeth on the plastic gear are 14 teeth. And the teeth on the metal gear are 16. Don't ask me why, it's a technical thing, but be aware of that. The one thing you don't want to forget is if you're dealing with a flywheel that has plastic teeth, then you need to get a starter gear that has plastic teeth. It's nylon, but still. If you're dealing with a flywheel that's steel, you have to have steel teeth on your starter. That's it. If you try to put a plastic gear on your starter and you have a metal flywheel, it'll just tear the gear up on the top of the starter. So let me go ahead and pull the 2 bolts out. It should be exactly the same as this. 2 bolts right at the top, just holds it in place. That's all there is to it. Let me take that off and I'll be right back. Okay, there is one very important thing. What the heck? 5612, I don't know. There's one very important thing that you have to remember. On your starters, you have an outer nut, and there's actually an inner nut behind it. And if you just go ahead and put your wrench on there and try to spin that nut off, it can actually turn the post, rip the post out, and make your starter absolutely no good. So you have to hold that rear nut with something, and there's not enough room to get a wrench in there. So what I'm going to do is use these pair of needle nose vice grips and get in there and hold on to that nut and keep it from spinning while I take it apart. You can ruin a starter and have to buy a brand new one just by not holding that nut, and I've done that before. So you can see what I mean by holding the nut behind it. There's a washer and a nut, and when I put the wrench on there, the entire post started spinning, and I didn't want to rip it out and ruin the starter. There's nothing wrong with the starter. So now that I've got the outer nut off, you can see that I'm holding the inner nut with these vice grips to keep the whole thing from turning and ripping the wires out. So keep that in mind. Now the only thing that holds these on are 2 bolts. And anything fairly new has star bits. Okay, it's just a T40. So the back one's often difficult to get to. Sometimes you have to pull this metal shroud off with these couple of screws, and this metal will come out of the way so that you can get in there. Other times you have to get a wrench on it. In this case, I was able to turn this so that it was out of my way enough. I bent this up slightly so I could get my wrench in there, or my T40. And now I'm just going to take the other one out. These can be sort of a pain in the butt, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's it. Star drive or regular socket. Star drive's usually easier to use. Now if you have, I have the short star drives. If you have the long ones that are like 3 inches long, then it'll go right past that whole thing and put that in and out for you easily. But you know, you may not want to go to the store and buy a set of tools you're only going to use once. But that's it. The starter's off. I can take my vice grips back off my nut. I don't want to lose these bolts, although I have tons of them. Let's go see. Let me put you back in the stand. And let's go see if that starter that we got today is the same, except for the gear, as the starter we pulled off of here, or as the starter we got from the donor motor. Now, let's put these together. And you see what I was talking about? I'm not concerned about the height difference. This one is a little bit deeper than this one. What I'm concerned about is this bracket here matching? And in order to find that out, I'm going to stand this thing up. In order to find that out, sorry, I know I'm terrible at filming. I hear it all the time. But there's other channels. Now, I know my old starter because it has a plastic ear that's all worn off. You can probably get a good view of that now, how those teeth are all worn off. There's the new one. All I want to know is if the holes are the same, and they're identical. I want to know if the height difference is the same from the top of the bracket to the bottom of the bracket, because that means that this Bendix is going to be the same height as the other one, and they are identical. So I don't see any reason why this starter won't work for that motor. Again, the winding body looks like it's maybe a ½ inch longer on the old one, but that's not going to make a difference for our uses. Our post is in the same place. We have one positive post, and everything else matches up. So the teeth are correct for this flywheel. We know that because we pulled this starter off of this machine with this flywheel. So we should be good to go. As long as the clearance is proper, which I'm almost 99% sure it is, what I'm going to do, and don't forget your little key. This is the key that goes on your shaft. You feel around there, and there's a groove. Let me go to the other side so I can show you. There's a little groove right there that this key fits into. Okay, and then your flywheel comes on, and the flywheel has a little key groove as well. Show you that. See the groove on the flywheel? That's your timing. So if this key is in the shaft correctly, and you spin that to match that correctly, then you know your timing is good. Now I can hear you saying, well, it came off of a different machine. What if the timing's different? The timing's not different. Most of these machines have interchangeable parts. The carburetor on this would work on the one that I just took apart, even if it's 3 or 4 horsepower different. They design these things so that they can shoot them out of the factory as fast as they can with as many interchangeable parts as they can. Then they put different numbers on them when you try and buy them aftermarket so that they can charge more money and say, oh, this only fits a 22 horse and you want a 24 horse or whatever. So I think we're good. So I'm going to put my key back in there. I'm going to put my flywheel down. I'm going to reinstall my starter, put my power wire back on it, and we're going to see if she'll spin this sucker. Okay, I got the starter back on. I also connected the hot wire back to the starter, so that's ready to go. Let's see what I want to show you real quick like. When I pulled the flywheel off the donor motor and I put it was hitting the magnets on the donor motor, and I assumed it's rust. When I stuck it on here temporarily, it was also dragging on the magnetos. So what I'm going to do is just loosen those up and back them up as far as they'll go. Tighten them back down. That way it wouldn't start because the air gap's not correct, but the new flywheel won't drag. And then we can always loosen these back up and reset the air gap correctly afterwards. I may have to take a little bit of sandpaper to the new flywheel or the donor flywheel. But for now, I don't want it dragging on these magnetos, because all we're looking to do right now for the win, now that the starter's on, is stick the new flywheel on there, lock it down, and see if it'll turn this motor. Now remember I said there's a little shaft, a keyway on the shaft. So I'm going to put this in place, line up that keyway, and see if that key will go in when it's in place. If not, I'm going to have to put the key in and then lower the flywheel down onto it. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Sometimes you just have to tap it in there. In this case, it doesn't look like there's enough room. So I'm going to pull this back off. I'm going to put the key in the keyway. I know you can't see it, but behind me I have a fence, the trailer to my bike, and a bunch of other crap. What I'm going to do is get a little bit of grease and stick it on here and use that as sort of glue to stick that in place. Now there is no one particular method that works on these. Sometimes it's a hit or miss, so I just have some grease here. And what I want to try to do is just take a little bit of grease and put it on this key and use it to hold the key in place while I slide the flywheel on. And that's usually enough. You may have to try it 2 or 3 times until you get everything to stay in place. It can be a pain in the butt. You can drop the key as well, and it's really dumb. It's something that should be this easy. It can be such a pain in the ass, but you just do the best you can. Oh, it would help if I was putting the flat. Why didn't you tell me I was putting it on upside down? That would help a little. Thanks for looking out for me. Ow, get your finger out of there. That hurts very badly. God damn it, that hurt. And key fell out of the way again. Let's try that again. Don't get your finger caught in there because that hurts a lot. Came out again. Okay. I'm going to keep trying. Sometimes it takes a few turns. I'm going to keep trying until I keep that key in between the flywheel and the shaft. Okay, now the key is in the keyway between the shaft and the flywheel. I can put my grease away before I spill it and drop it. Now all that goes on top of that flywheel is a washer and a nut. Spin that down and tighten it up. Now this fan is taller than the fan that originally came on this. I have checked that off camera, and it is just a bit taller. And because we want that to fit correctly underneath of our plastic cowling and our seat, I will change that. There's 3-4 bolts in the top of this one, and there's only 2 here. But I will pull those 4 bolts, take that fan off, and put this fan on in its place. It's the same circumference, it's just a little bit shorter. But that's not what we're trying to do right now. So let me get my air gun, let me tighten that nut down, and then we can test this thing and see if it's going to work. Hang on. Okay, I've tightened down the flywheel. That's good. Starter's in place. That's good. Everything looks okay. The starter looks a little bit close, but we're going to know in a second. I haven't changed the fan yet. I'm going to hit the key and see if it'll spin. Wish me luck. I haven't done anything with this that you haven't seen. Hopefully the battery's not dead. Battery's dead. Oh no, that stupid thing had a connection on the wire, wasn't the greatest. I didn't fix that yet. So let's see if we can make it start. I'm a little nervous. I'm hoping this will work. We're getting nothing out of the starter. Why are we getting nothing out of the starter? The safety switch is on. Bring you back in a minute. Okay, we know we had a problem with the key. If you watched the first video, you saw that on the key, someone had pulled wires. There's electrical issues, that kind of stuff. And we were getting intermittent power to the starter. Now these wires down here, the coating has come off of them, that kind of thing. It could be a lot of things. It could be something loose. It could be a loose ground. So in order just to fix this video or to finish this video on a high note, I'm just going to jump the solenoid. And let's just see if this starter will spin this motor. Because that, my friends, is what we're after today. We are after seeing if this flywheel and starter will work. And by Job, I think we've got it. That is fucking brilliant, because I was going to have to order this part today for 75 bucks or 78 bucks or whatever it was. Then I was going to have to take the old flywheel apart, put the new ring on the flywheel, take the starter apart, put the new starting gear on the starter. And it was going to be another 2 hours worth of work and waiting days and spending 80 bucks on parts for this machine that we bought for $1. Thank you, Carlitos. And I hope that when you watch this, you know that it was probably a lot of work for you to do if you don't work on these things, if you're not a mechanic. And to pay someone to put this thing back together would have cost you as much as it would cost to go and buy a new one. You know, it costs $1,000 to start changing parts, checking systems, fixing wiring, you name it, you name it, you name it. So later I will figure out what's going on with the key. We're going to replace the key anyway. But now we know that this starter with this gear works on this flywheel, turns this motor. So I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to adjust our magnetos back. Right now there's no air gap. It's just wide open. I'm going to adjust those back and we're going to see if we can start this thing. Now we're just going to set these down and dirty old school style with a business card. It's about the appropriate thickness. I'm going to loosen these. I'm going to spin the flywheel by hand until the magnets are lined up with the magnetos. Doesn't matter which direction you spin it. And when the magneto is in place on the magnets, you put the business card in, and then you let the magnets hold the magneto to itself. You just tighten it back down. And we'll spin it to get our card back out. And that gives us enough of an air gap between everything. I don't like the fact that that's a little bit close. I'm going to back that up just a tad because it looks like this magneto might be going bad. So we might have to get a new magneto. Who knows? We just basically want a tiny gap between the magnet and the magneto. And now I'm going to turn the magnet back. This is a single magnet, and a lot of times there's a double magnet, so that's why one side was off and the other wasn't. Now we've got a gap between both of them, and when I spin it, nothing is hitting. So we're good there. Let's bring it back. I'm just going to do the same thing on this one. You don't need to watch that. I'm going to set the other one the same way, and then we're going to see if we can start this thing. That fuel tank's been laying down on the side since yesterday, and there may or may not be fuel going from the pump into the carb. And the carb's dirty, we already know that. So a little bit of fuel to prime it. And let's hit the key and see if we're good. that should have started. It's been running. I haven't taken spark plug leads off. I wonder if the gap's not right or if the magnets are wrong. That shouldn't make a difference because those are not hooked up. That's not hooked up. Let me try it one more again. And then we're going to have to look at the magnets on the old flywheel and the new one to see if they match up. If the magnets are wrong, the timing could be off. And this might have all been for nothing. She's wanting to. Now it doesn't want to die. I'll bring it back and we'll start it off. She didn't want to die. That's funny. The more times I run this thing, the more times the carburetor's actually cleaning itself out because it wasn't that dirty. Why it took so long? We have a temporary fuel tank hooked up. All right, now it is full of fuel. The fuel line is to there. It did have air bubbles going through it. The fuel pump itself was empty, and it took a minute to get the fuel from the fuel pump into the carburetor, through the carburetor. That happens from time to time. I was a little bit concerned that, excuse me, allergies are killing me. I was a little bit concerned that maybe the magnets were different. But when I look on here, we have one single magnet as well. So that is not our case. Our timing is not our case. Once she started, you may have sounded like it ran a little bit rough to you, but again, the carburetor's dirty. So that's what our cause was. And what I was doing to kill it was taking the throttle and putting it all the way to the lowest throttle setting, and it was killing the motor. Now when I put it down there, it wanted to stay running and idling at low speed. So the carburetor's going to get a quick tickle, but she starts and runs. Flywheel's fixed, starter's fixed, and for me it didn't cost anything because we got that donor riding mower today, and as I said, Jim's going to take the motor off, scrap the motor for a couple of bucks, and I took the starter and the flywheel. And we're going to get him another motor and put it on there. And it's in really good shape. So it's worth it for me to let him have that. He'll probably keep it and sell one of his other ones and make a few $100s. And I'm fine with that because he does my pickups, my deliveries. Of course, he gave me, or I took the flywheel and the starter off of it. So that saved me 70, 80 bucks. Just on my current project, and I still get this, and I'll run through that, clean the carburetor, get it running, sell it for 100 bucks, maybe more. It's self-propelled. But we tend to just do stuff like that together. He drives and has a trailer. I don't drive, so I can't get some things done without him, and things like this work out. So there we go. Flywheel replaced, starter replaced. The old starter right there, I will do a video on sometime this week because that plastic gear is all ground off and screwed up. I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but it's all chewed up. So I will show you how to pull that apart and put the new plastic gear on it. And then that'll go on the shelf because that style works on many riding mowers. Troybilt, Briggs, any Briggs motor. I can't think of any names right now. It's been one of those kind of days. but it fits on Murray. It fits on probably not John Deere. They have specialty shit, so they can charge more money. But it fits on many, many, many different brands. Husky, MTD. So that'll go on the shelf, and somebody comes along and needs a starter later, or I do, it's there, and I can make 50 bucks selling it to somebody else, or use it on another one of my projects. So now we know we got a good motor. She'll start right up now. I'm going to start it again. I'm going to pull the carburetor and clean it this time. And, you know, we're going to have to put a new key switch on it for 20 bucks. New PTO switch, that kind of thing. But we know now the motor starts, runs, drives. As soon as I fix the electrical issue, it'll be turnkey. And we're on our way to putting this thing back together. Now that the flywheel's on and the starter's on, I can put all the top covers on. I can put the archway back on, put the seat back on, and I can actually take this thing for a drive. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the way out the door, and there'll be more videos on this machine in the coming days. See you soon.